Hey, family, happy Tuesday. I don't know if you know this, but the very definition of a monologue is a long, tedious speech by one person during a conversation. And some of us are having monologues publicly. And we're going to jump right into what I mean by that right after today's intro. You are excellence. Your mind is of excellence. Your visions are of excellence. Your unique superpower is nothing short of excellence. You amplify a voice of excellence. Your contribution to this world will be of excellence. You will achieve your highest goals and desires with excellence. Excellence in everything, every time. Hey, family, and happy Tuesday. I'm Lanita, your host of Excellence in Everything Live. I am a professional speaker by trade, and I have the privilege of working with individuals to help them create strength in their soft skills so that they are better communicators with those that they love and lead. If you've been following this series, Stage Power, it started because of some content I created a few weeks ago about when I started speaking. I was not as polished, not as articulate, and I really did have to work to build that skill. The video is still getting commented on today. Thousands have viewed it on Facebook and as well as Instagram. And so I was inspired to start this series, Stage Power. Today's topic, well, let me go back for a second. Some of the things that we've talked about so far was overcoming your stage fright, working on your articulation and pronunciation, the importance of tone. And then today, our content is around your audience or your talk needs a commercial break. So this is more so content development. The other three topics were more so on the skill of speaking. Now we're on the skill of creating the content that you'll speak on. So this is a little bit more in the weeds today, but I love the weeds. So that just gives you some context. So if you are curious to see the other topics, make sure you jump back in and catch those. I believe that it is your job, if you are being invited in to speak to a group of people, it is your job to, one, create the energy and keep the energy in the room. When you meet or listen to a profound speaker, what they have in common is the ability to have you at the edge of their seat, of your seat, for the duration of the time that they have you. An average speaking slot is about 45 minutes to 60 minutes, which is a long time. And when you think about a professional speaker, and tonight's topic is not for professional speakers, but I want to give you some context. When you think about a professional speaker, the only thing that they have is a microphone, possibly a set of PowerPoint slides. And that's it. It is literally their voice that gets you on the edge of your seat. And what they are doing is being intentional about how they're structuring the time that they have with you. So today I'm actually giving you secrets of those tricks of the trade, how you can create and keep the energy in the room. So if you are invited to speak, it could be as small as your children's career day. It could be as small as your staff meeting that you're leading. It could be as small as invited to share your story for, a group of college students. It could be you speaking up with a ministry that you're related. Anytime someone asks you for you to come and share for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, what we're going to talk about tonight is something that you can absolutely use. Before we jump in, I want to remind you there are three ways. Well, there's technically four, but there are three ways that we can work together. You can bring me in to speak. You guys know that. That's the low-hanging fruit way. You can hire me to train your frontline employees or your staff or your leadership team. I love to do training. And then lastly, we can partner on a curriculum that you may have and or a program or initiative that you would like to implement. Okay, so when we're talking about your talk needs commercial breaks. Commercial breaks refer to the gap between you being informative and you being entertaining, if I could break it down. So think of your time when you have in front of an audience. There are several elements that make up a powerful talk. It's informative, it's engaging. You feel emotionally moved. All of your senses are activated. So maybe they make you laugh, they make you smile. They create such a strong imagery in their storytelling that you can visualize what they're describing. Maybe you can even smell it a little bit. So those are the components of what will be an effective orator, essentially. So one of the ways that you can begin to strip down your time to create a great structure is to write out the time that you have. So when someone invites you to come and do a talk, maybe come talk to their junior staff about your career, ask them, how much time are you allotting? And if they say, just coming, no, get a concrete time, because that helps you devise a very powerful talk. So what you'll do is you'll write out your time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to first teach you what should go into your talk. It doesn't matter if it's formal or informal. These are some things. You don't have to use all of them. And then I'll teach you how you can devise that time structure. So the first part of your talk would normally be an introduction. When a novice speaker comes to a stage, or a novice, no, let's not call them a speaker. Let's call them a person who communicates but is not as confident in what they're talking about. Typically, their introduction will be honestly getting over their nervousness. So they'll say things like, they'll joke like, wow, this is I'm so nervous to be in front of you today. Or they'll thank the host repeatedly, and they'll thank other people. They'll make a reference to them getting there. Those are what we call in the professional speaking world, those are time fillers. So if you have a limited amount of time, and this is the biggest differentiator. If you have a lot of time, then you have to fill the time. So you do have a slow walk. So you do what I just said. You make jokes before you even jump in. You thank the person. You shout out the audience. You do a call and response. If you're filling time, if you're limited in time, you do not do that. You jump right into it. Likely a person would have already introduced you, or if you have limited time, you should ask the person who invited you to introduce you, so you don't use your time on the introduction. So in addition to the introduction, there's a build-up for what you're going to say. This could be an antidote. An antidote is just a small story. It could be funny. It could be memorable. It could be emotional. But there's a build-up to your main point. So you don't just come out and say, I got 10 points I want to tell y'all before I go. Well, you could say that. But the topic of our show is excellence in everything live, and that's not excellence. So the buildup could be, I had to learn, let's say you were doing a speech on 3 reasons why. Let's say you are a great carpenter. You were invited, you have your own carpentry business at this point. You have a full staff. You were invited back to your carpentry school to talk about your career journey. You're 15 years in, and you're still amazed that you're in business. So your talk is 15 minutes. If you were using this format, the buildup might be, I remember what it was like to sit in your seat. I remember sitting in the seat wondering, did I make the right decision? Is this really the trade for me? And is this going to make money to feed my kids? You see how that initially, it automatically, if you're talking to a person who is in the seat now, maybe they can't relate to everything that you said, but there will be something that resonates with them just by the nature of you all being in the same kind of field. And then pointing out to them that you were once there. So you don't come out over them. You come out what we would call meeting them where they are. So you never talked about how things are going and what you did to get there. You're building up to that. That's an example of a build up. Next, you would drive into your key points. And if you are watching live, let me pull up my comments windows because I didn't do that. So I can see you here. If you're here, if you're watching live, let me know that. Say, hey, I'm live. If you happen to catch the replay, type in #replay. And if you have any questions, jump in and ask them. So after your build up, you will go into your key points. You don't always have to have 3. You shouldn't have more than 3, to be honest. And I want you to think about what it's like to be a listener when a person's giving you a lot of information. The goal is to go deep and not wide. Wide would be, here are 10 reasons why you should go into carpentry. Versus deep would be, here's the reason why I went into carpentry. And one reason, but maybe that reason is I did it for my family. I was battling with addiction. It was the easiest thing I could get to, and I was good with my hands. That's one reason, but there are so many points you can pull out of why you did it for your family.
versus I did it for my family. I did it because according to Forbes magazine, like your point, you can stick with 1 point and make it deep. You can stick with 2 points, make it deep. You can stick with 3 points, make it deep. But any more than that is too many points. You now have parts. So if you have a lot of points that you like to make, pick 3 or 2. And if you have less than 15 minutes, you should only be speaking from 1 point. So the goal is to not overwhelm your listeners. The goal is that when you leave, they remember what you said. So if you give them too much information, that is hard to remember. Give them one big thing that sticks with them for years to come. And who did this successfully was Kevin Durant's mom when he was drafted. And you probably remember the phrase that he kept saying repeatedly. Now, that speech is different because it was what we call an impromptu speech, where he might have ran in his mind what he would say, but it wasn't probably scripted like a speech that President Biden would give at the State of the Union address. So it might have been a mixture. Casey said, making your responses from personal experiences has a greater impact. Absolutely. And people know when you are, they know when you are, I would say maybe digging for an emotional appeal or when you're being authentic. So try your best to be authentic. Love that. Great point. But yes, keep your points to 3 or less. So let's keep going. Parts of a talk. Then you have your transitions. So when we first started the show, I said the definition of a monologue is a long, tedious speech by one person during a conversation. So that means one person in the midst of talking to another person has a long and tedious speech while the other person is listening. The opposite of a monologue is a dialogue, and that is the most powerful form of communication, particularly when you're leading something. You want people to talk back because if you know anything about adult learning, adults want to feel included when they're learning. They want to feel like their experiences matter, like they have something to contribute because they do. So they want a dialogue. So having transitions help with this. So transitions can be a game. Transitions can be an icebreaker. Transitions can be a group discussion about what you taught or just an opportunity for them to talk back. Transitions could be raise your hand as it relates to something that you were talking about, but you got to find a way to get them involved so it doesn't feel like a long talk in a conversation that you're having. It feels like a dialogue. 2 more. So then you have your commercial breaks. These are things unrelated to what you're teaching, but it keeps the audience engaged. So I mentioned to you when I started, I've been speaking technically for 10 years. I mean this in the most humble way, but I'm very good. I know that I'm good, but it took a lot of practice. When I started speaking, I started out in middle school gymnasiums. I was 22. I looked like a kid. If you think I look now, imagine what I looked like 12 years ago. And I wrestled with adults taking me serious. So I remember I had long hair. I cut it like Nia Long because I knew if I had short hair, people would assume I was an adult. And it did work, by the way. But I started in middle school gymnasiums as a part of my full-time job. I was representing a campaign, and they had data about if 6th graders were exposed to what it was like to attend college, the application components, and were given like some background about what they could do academically to prepare for college, they'd be more likely to go and graduate. That's what the data said in 2011. So they hired me as an outreach initiative to go inside the middle schools and teach middle schoolers about this initiative, but obviously in their language. That's how I got my start. So my work day consisted of traveling to a middle school to host an assembly, sometimes 7 in one day for 45 minutes with 500 middle schoolers. That's how I got started. So when people say, how did you get good? That's how. And to be honest, if you did that, you would be good too, because middle schoolers don't care about your feelings. They don't care about being proper. They don't care about being quiet. If you're not interesting, entertaining, you have to be good. Well, you have to be engaging and fun and relevant. So that's where I started. So when I think about commercial breaks, coming from that background, now I don't do that anymore, but coming from that background, I just wanted to give you a lens. Even in adults want to have fun too. So a commercial break could be everybody stand up. You could do a stretch. You could do an exercise. I do this mind exercise where I have people extend their hand, and it's a lot of things you could do. You could do a 10-minute like breathing exercise. You could do, depending on how much time you have, you could stick sticky notes under a random person's chair and ask them to pick a sticky note and then read off what's written on there. And what is written on there could be related to what you're teaching. Have them say it out loud. But you need breaks of time where they're not completely concentrated on what you're driving home. So you'll have a commercial break and then you'll go back to a main point. This is how you keep an audience engaged. And now that I'm kind of teaching you these tricks of the rule or these tricks of the jungle, when you listen to a motivational speaker or a speaker who is doing, someone who is a professional speaker, someone who does that, like that's their primary source of revenue, you will see this now that I've pointed it out. The last part of the talk is the closing. So that's all I got, is not a closing. Y'all got questions? It's not a closing. Did I leave anything out? It's not a closing. There's several ways you can close. Some people close by reinforcing what they said. Some people close with a powerful story that drives home the points that they were making. Some people close with reminding them of like their core message in their name. They'll say, I'm Lanita Hostin, and I just want to remind you, live every day in excellence. That would be a closing. And then you let the audience clap, and then you open up for Q&A. So your closing should be you basically tying a bow around the experience that you provide or are giving. So I want to show you this example. This is an example of how you could structure your talk. So you may start off with 10 minutes, why this matters to you. So you're talking about drunk driving, how it affects drivers, how you know that you're drunk when you're driving. Then with 5 minutes, you may go in and say, my niece was injured from a drunk driver. That's why this matters to me. So there's a switch there. You went from being informational to having an emotional appeal. So you didn't stay in why you shouldn't do this. This is a really good example. Then you'll spend 10 minutes on why it should matter to them. And then you might share a story of someone who may have experienced the same thing. So this time, maybe it's a YouTube video. And then you may spend some time, the next block of time, what can they do about it? Those who are listening. And then you may open up time for people to share. And do you see that the bulk of, on the last one, spending 15 minutes with Q&A, you always leave time for connection. If you absorb the time talking, you're basically saying, what I came here to say is more important than what you have to say while you're here learning. And that's never the goal. You always, which is why you write out your time, because you want to see how much time do I have to really make a connection, to make it impactful, and for them to also have a dialogue with me. That Q&A portion, or whatever you want to call it, open discussion, open floor, it is pivotal. It's the easiest way to make connection in any kind of forum you're in. If you're in ministry, if you're in a school group, if you lead a leadership team, you want to make time for them to talk back. All right, here's another example of how you could organize or structure the time. This is a short period of time. I think this is like 30 minutes. So maybe you'll start with a 2-minute impactful story. This is when being brief is golden. Being succinct is golden. It is hard to be brief, clear, and effective. And that is why the only way you can do that is by writing it down. So you might start with a 2-minute impactful story, 2 minutes why this matters to you. And look, that activity is 5 minutes because they are more important than what you have to say. Them learning or them digesting what you're teaching is more important than what you have to say. You creating opportunity for dialogue is more important than having a monologue. I want you to think of it that way. Then you may open up the floor for discussion on the topic. So it's an open floor, and you see that's 10 minutes. Again, in this topic, in that time, you will find that people will have questions that allow you to talk about maybe what you plan to say. They may ask you questions related to that. So you'll find that you won't be duplicating what you're saying. Then you may go into why this matters to you, what they can do about it. And then you see that last piece. It's 12 minutes, a call to action activity. So that might be, okay, now that I've taught you this, tell me what you're going to do with it. You may give them 3 minutes to think about it. And then you may give them 30 seconds each to share. That might take 12 minutes. You may give them 15 seconds to share each. That might take 10 minutes. But they need time to talk back to you. So that's why knowing your time is so pivotal. Know the time that someone gets to you. And I want to remind you this, like, it doesn't matter if people in the room are asleep, if they're tired, if they don't want to be there, if they're only there because it's mandatory. None of those things matter. In fact, if you're really intentional about making sure that you are effective, you will anticipate how they will feel being in the room. Did they have to get there early? Was breakfast provided? Was coffee provided? Are you right before lunch? When you're thinking about your talk, you have to be thinking about where they are when you meet them there. So if you know, meaning right before lunch, then you know you have to start high energy. Maybe you'll start with an activity, jumping jacks, breathing, or a high energy song. Get them dancing. Maybe you'll start with you'll come down doing what's that line dance when people are on the sides and then you come down the middle? Soul Train. Maybe you may ask the organizer, like, hey, can we do a Soul Train line in the staff meeting? I want to come through the middle of the room. Like, you have to create and keep the energy. So there's no excuses, even if you don't feel like, oh man, like they're going to be this. Okay, Casey has a question. How difficult is it to develop open-ended questions? How do you keep them engaged? From a previous point, how difficult is it to develop open-ended questions? Okay, so Casey, I think you're talking about, are you talking about, I think here, and let me know if I have this correct. You're talking about when you have the opportunity to provide or give your audience a chance to talk back to you. Is that difficult? Let me know if I understand that correctly. So I'll be honest, Q&A is very scary for most people because you can't anticipate what they're going to say. You don't know if someone's going to say something that could, how do I put this? Challenge the information that you presented, challenge your opinion, call you out for being biased. You have no idea. Especially when you know the people in the room. I find that those are the times, and when you don't know them, when you don't know the person. But Q&A gets a little tricky. And to be honest, most people don't leave time for Q&A for that very reason. But here's what I would suggest. And Casey, I'm looking to make sure I understood your question correctly. People love authenticity. They like humanness. They like for people to be themselves, even if it is uncomfortable. So if you open up the floor for questions and someone asks you something that makes your skin cringe, you should say that. Speak to the uncomfortable feeling that you have. You could say, so let's say someone says, you said something in your presentation today that came off as discriminatory. Like you favor Black people over Hispanics. What do you have to say about that? That would be putting somebody on the hot seat. And my response to that would be, literally, this is how I would respond to that. It depends. Because if I didn't know I did that, let's say I didn't know I did that and that was not the intent of my message. I would say, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I didn't realize it came off that way. While it's not my intention to be discriminatory, I could see, if this is true, I can see how you felt that way. And I would literally have to think about my response. And if I have to and I'm silent, I would literally have to say, I really have to think about how I want to rephrase how I speak about that topic. That might be something I have to put some extra attention to. You might even say, and I welcome your suggestions. Be honest. I didn't mean that. I wasn't dismissive. And I didn't gaslight, meaning make a person feel like what they observed didn't really happen. So take ownership of, if it's appropriate, you can take ownership of the impact that you might have had, even if it was unintentionally. Now, if people ask very personal questions and you don't want to talk about that, then you'll just have to say, that's a little personal. I don't want to go that deep. And just be honest. And then ask for the next question. So, Casey, I think I answered your question. If I didn't, let me know. But I think so. I think I got it. Great question, by the way. I would love to know, if you are watching today and you've been following the series, what you have found most helpful during this time. What have you found most helpful? We talked about conquering your inner critic before you even get on stage, talking yourself out of that. I can't do it. It's hard. I'm nervous. I'm not good enough. So we talked about that. We talked about improving your articulation and pronunciation. And we talked about stop yelling, do this instead, which is based on your tone and how your tone conveys emotion, just being intentional about how you want to convey when speaking. So let me know which of the topics have been eye-opening for you or most helpful. And last thing I'll share is that next week I am having an open floor Q&A. So if you have an upcoming talk, upcoming presentation, something that you're working on, maybe you're speaking on a panel and you have no idea what you're doing or what you should do, bring those questions. It'll be your opportunity to talk back, to have a deeper dialogue next week. And I'm excited about that. I've never done that before. This is something that I'm trying. Okay, so I will say this. Listen, I'm going to show you this. My dog bit my power cord today, so I don't have that much battery. And I was so glad that I got through today's show because I didn't want you guys to power off while I was still speaking. Casey, you're absolutely welcome, and thank you for joining. And I hope that you'll continue to come back, and I appreciate your support. So that's it for tonight. I will see you next Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. Again, we have open floor Q&A. If you have questions that you'd like to submit, you can type them in the comments. I do read them, even if you catch the replay. And again, I'm excited about this series, Stage Power, because when you take back the power of advocating for yourself in a public space, it is so freeing. And no one can do that for you. That's a skill that has to be nurtured. And while public speaking is America's number one fear, it's feared more than death. Having the skill, I think it gives you a different kind of confidence walking into meetings, even when you may be on the defense. Gives you a different kind of skill when you have to speak up for things that matter related to your children or aging parents. So the skill is not only used in front of large audiences, they're also used when you're having a dialogue with someone in authority or someone who has like decision-making abilities over something that matters to you. So when you think of it that way and not more so of it as a work skill, it becomes almost a necessity to get comfortable in the skill. And that's what the Stage Power series was designed to do. The everyday man and woman, giving them back their voice so that they feel confident to speak up and advocate for the things that matter to them. And that's why this is important to me. And that is why I had to create a whole series out of it. Oh, man, Dwayne, it's good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Yes, you caught us at the end. We had a great show today, so you definitely got to catch the replay. All right, family, I am out of here. I'll see you next Tuesday. I love you. There's absolutely nothing you could do about it.
You are excellence. Your mind is of excellence. Your visions are of excellence. Your unique superpower is nothing short of excellence.